So I'm gonna give a little bit of extra info on me for those who haven't been following my channel for too long. Now, when I started this channel, I was 22 years old and I made it so I could talk about a few of the shows that I grew up watching that have left huge impacts on my life. And I consider myself so fortunate that this channel has now hit 30,000 subs. That's just an amazing number, and it's one I never in my life expected. And I couldn't be more grateful to you all for helping me build this channel up to that. Now, the reason I'm letting you all know this is because I feel you should know that when I started this channel, I had kind of already stopped watching cartoons. Hence why I don't normally talk about any shows that are still fairly new. That being said, you guys gave me so many requests to review The Loud House that when I finally broke down and watched it, it eventually became one of my favorite animated shows. And not only that, because the show ended up being so enjoyable to me, I started watching other newer shows you guys have been requesting, like Star vs. the Forces of Evil and OKKO. So yeah, maybe in a few months you can start expecting reviews on those shows. All thanks to how well The Loud House ended up being for me. Now, with all that praise out of the way, let's rip some of its episodes to shreds. Yeah, even though I really liked the first few seasons of The Loud House, there were definitely some episodes that have been nothing short of terrible. And since I did a top 10 list on this show, only on episodes from the first 2 seasons, I think it'd be fair to do the same with this list. So yeah, let's just get right into it. This is the top 5 worst Loud House episodes.
You are... And that is why you are the worst sister ever!
The Greenhouse. Normally, I applaud episodes that try to get environmental messages across, but unfortunately it seems like this episode forgot that's what it was doing for a time. It's about Lincoln's class trying to lower their carbon footprint so they can get the Alpha J Show's baby brother named after them. But because Lincoln's house has so many people in it, he can't keep his carbon footprint down, making him have to resort to drastic measures with his household to improve it.
And if we don't all do our part, this adorable little guy won't survive.
Now, I really do give them credit at the start, because I feel like they are trying to be creative with these attempts, while still trying to say some of these might actually be worth considering for your own households. I mean, you know, the ones that you would actually find in your households. But there's just so much wrong with this episode that just overshadows the things they seem to get right. And I guess I'll start with the side characters, because honestly, I think they might be the worst part of this episode. Like Lincoln's teacher berating him for not doing his part.
What does this say? Have a heart, do your part. Do you not care about polar bears?
No, I don't hate polar bears. They're awesome.
What's that? You hate polar bears? You're a polar bear hater?
I get that's for a comedic effect, but it's a very obnoxious kind of comedy that seems to really only appeal to a handful of people. The rest are just left feeling angry or annoyed by that type of treatment. Lincoln's friends are no better either. Like, when Lincoln does manage to lower his carbon footprint, his friends come over and ruin it. And their reason?
Can't play swords and cyborgs at our houses. We're in the green zone.
And this makes no sense to me, because if Lincoln is apparently the one costing them, and if it means so much to them, you would think they wouldn't want to spoil it. Yet, they seem perfectly okay with spoiling it, so long as Lincoln gets the blame.
Well, I guess you're going back into the red.
Which means you're gonna lose the polar bear challenge for our class.
Which means we can't be seen with you.
Which means your social life is out the window.
And I know there's an attempt to make Lincoln out to look like the bad guy, because he tries to make his sister sacrifice everything when he instead gives up nothing. But I don't know, even with that, I wouldn't say that makes him worse than the side characters. And it doesn't feel like Lincoln's the bad guy. It feels more like he needs to learn a lesson in not letting people walk all over him, which has nothing to do with their original message.
Well, if it's a problem, we can go.
No. I'll make an adjustment.
Man, I think you guys got a little mixed up as to what episode you were trying to write. With a little elbow grease, this could have been a really strong environmental message. I mean, nothing in here seems like it's unfixable, but as is common with some of the worst episodes of any show, the writers got a little too lost with what their previous implications were, and as a result, made an episode filled with more elements that would infuriate its audience, as opposed to entertain them and maybe even inspire them. And that's unfortunate for an episode that seemed to have a lot of promise.
And that is why you are the worst sister ever!
One of the boys. While I'm sure no one's shocked by this episode being included, I'm sure they're shocked it's so low on the list, but honestly, I don't find this episode infuriating. I mean, I think it's a great idea. Lincoln goes to an alternate dimension where he has 10 brothers instead of 10 sisters, and gets to see how his life would be. Hell, I even like the casting of some of the brothers. Greg Sipes, Seth Green, Rob Paulsen, Sean Astin. These are actors I really enjoy. All that being said, yeah, this idea unfortunately gets ruined because they focus way too hard on making the boys complete stereotypes. Now, while the girl characters have stereotypical moments, they're mostly still very unique characters who find a way to stand out. Whereas all the boys, the traits they have that make the sisters stand out, are all minimized to where they all just kind of become the same character.
How's it going, stinking? Ow! Oh, you're fine.
But honestly, I can't really fault the writers too much, because it's gotta be hard making 10 characters all stand out in some way, yet still being different from the main characters all in 11 minutes. But even then, there's still those moments where they rely on so many cheap writing tactics. In fact, they basically make the girls all the same character at the start, just so they can give Lincoln a reason to see what having 10 brothers would be like. Even though, really, Lincoln doesn't need a reason. That would be something any little boy would be curious about if he only had sisters. So, I don't think the first few minutes are even that necessary. It could have literally just started with Lisa handing him the keys to the alternate universe, and Lincoln explaining to the audience that he loves his sisters, but sometimes he wonders what having brothers would be like, and how not many kids get the chance to actually see that. And I don't think anyone would really question it that much, which would have given them the full 11 minutes to work on these boys' characters, instead of only about 60% of the episode. Really, the only thing removing the first few minutes would affect is Lincoln initially wanting to stay in the universe where he has brothers. But that could have been easily removed too. They could have just made this whole episode about Lincoln just wanting to see what having brothers is like, and then progressively realizing he prefers having his sisters and starting to miss them. Instead of forcing a reason for Lincoln to not like having brothers, that just makes the episode come off as sloppy. This is an episode that feels really overthought, but in all the wrong places. There's too much thought going into situations that don't require it, and not enough thought on stuff that's actually important. Personally, I would like to see the Loud Brothers appear in a 22-minute long special, as I feel that would give the writers more free range to do amazing things with them. And if they do something like that, I'd be glad to review it and see if they were able to make any redemptions for this episode. But overall, I think this episode is so stereotypical, so cheaply written, and just an overall waste of a good idea, that it does belong at the bottom of the Loud House episodes. Not that kind of bottom!
And that is why you are the worst sister ever!
Making the grade. Man, it's so hard not to question if the staff behind the show has some kind of vendetta against Lincoln, because they seem to enjoy punishing him for the most minuscule of reasons. This episode is about Lincoln's child prodigy sister Lisa joining Lincoln's class and making life for Lincoln and his classmates miserable by showing off and making 5th grade into basically a Harvard class.
Lisa, since you're new, I don't expect you to have...
Done.
Wow. If a former kindergartner can read the whole book this quickly, I expect all of you to do the same by tomorrow.
Aww.
So Lincoln asks her to tone it down a notch, which Lisa agrees to. However, this has a reverse effect. Because Lisa enjoys being average, she gives up on all of her smarts that apparently do a lot of good, and everyone blames Lincoln. I mean, let me show you how Lincoln gets Lisa to change.
You're acting way too smart in class. It's annoying everyone, and they're taking it out on me. Could you please just try and act like an average kid?
That's it! That's all he does. First of all, Lincoln had every reason in the world to want Lisa to tone it down a notch, because he was the one getting blamed at school for her actions. I mean, if this episode instead had Lincoln jumping to the conclusion that Lisa was gonna be a menace before she even did anything, and telling her to tone it down before she caused any grief, this would have been a little more tolerable, but instead it looks like Lincoln is doomed to just choose between either suffering at school or suffering at home, and for no other reason than he's related to Lisa. Hell, Lincoln even gets blamed for kids getting strep throat because of his innocent request.
Way to go, Buster. Now all my kids have strep throat.
I'm sorry, but I didn't have a choice. If she kept acting like a brain, I was gonna be out of the gang.
That explanation is completely wrong, and you know it. It was more than he was being ostracized by his friends. His sister was literally making it to where he and all of his classmates had to do ridiculously impossible tasks. Also, the transition of his classmates from being angry at Lisa for putting them through academic hell to completely forgiving her and accepting her seem incredibly quick.
Who can recite the Gettysburg Address?
85 Elm Street. Get it?
What the? One joke and she's already forgiven and accepted? Damn, I wish I knew a good joke in high school. I'd have had a lot more friends. Bottom line, this episode just focuses too hard on making Lincoln suffer, and it's for reasons that you sympathize more with him for, which you're not supposed to do in order for this episode to work. Also, I guess this episode was going for a don't try and change someone's storyline, something they've already done a few times before, and in much better ways. And I guess they were trying to mix up how they got the message across, which I guess I can give them credit for at least trying, but I don't know, I think this would have worked a lot better if they cleaned up a few mistakes that were very easy to fix. With a little toning down on Lisa's part and on Lincoln's suffering, it could have been a nice little episode about why Lincoln shouldn't try to change his sister because he assumes she's gonna make life hell for him, instead of Lincoln having to suffer the consequences of being related to her. Making the grade, huh? Well, you certainly earned this grade.
Who knows the most common gas in the Earth's atmosphere?
Methane. Get it?
Thank you, raunchy knockoff watered-down version of Luann.
And that is why you are the worst sister ever!
Brawl in the family. Ah, what an infamous episode we have here. Anyone who's even been the slightest fan of the Loud House has probably heard people complain about this bust. It's about Lenny and Lori getting into a fight because they bought the same dress, and it results in so many things making living in the house harder. As in, only harder for Lincoln. The other sisters seem very unaffected and suspiciously used to it. Kinda weird Lincoln isn't since he lives in the same house though. So Lincoln tries to make things better, but instead he makes things a hell of a lot worse. So first of all, I'm a little offended at how fast this episode gets right into the main point, because it takes all of 20 seconds for them to establish that the house is closed down because of the sisters fighting. Yet, they spend 4 minutes making Lincoln get sick of his sisters and one of the boys. Come on, obviously you guys have thought about using as much of your episode as possible, but you couldn't do it there. And you know what? They still completely wasted it here. This whole episode is nothing but stretches, unexplained reasonings, and forceful humor. Lincoln can't go into the kitchen or the bathroom because Lori and Lenny are in there cooling off, even though Lincoln being in the same room as them shouldn't be an issue in the slightest. Okay, well, the bathroom's an issue, but come on, Lenny, let the guy take a piss. The sisters also use Lincoln's blankets to make a divider between the two, and demand Lincoln sleep under dirty laundry. Hell, even listen to their reasonings to why Lincoln can't even watch TV.
Lori and Lenny are on edge. You watching a monster truck rally is not going to help them.
Was this a rough draft? No, even a rough draft wouldn't have such a weak explanation like that. Hell, even if you're saying that's for comedy's sake, it's so damn dry and just makes the episode even more obnoxious. And the reason they use for the rest of his treatment is sister fight protocol.
In this family, we have a sister fight protocol. Butt out and let them resolve it on their own.
Mr. Fight Protocol, Lori and Lenny dine separately.
And we have to eat with them both so they don't think we're taking sides.
Now I'm even more suspicious as to how he hasn't noticed this. Do Lincoln's sisters know Rick Sanchez and they just keep taking his memories away each time a sister fight breaks out? There's also a very weird thing they do with Lincoln, where he acts like his complete normal self whenever he's not around Lenny and Lori. Yet, when he tries to get them to hug it out, he suddenly turns into a complete idiot, saying stuff that even Patrick Star could have told him would only make things worse.
Lenny, why don't you just return the dress? Lori once said blue makes you look washed out anyway.
Wait, what?
Okay, I'm just spitballing here. Lori, why don't you return the dress? Lenny says taffeta makes you look like Aunt Ruth, and who wants that?
I mean, I get this episode tries, again very poorly, to establish that Lincoln doesn't understand why girls fight.
You gotta be kidding me. Clyde and I wore the same shirt on picture date, and we didn't care.
It's a sister thing. You wouldn't understand.
But you don't have to not understand girls to know this would have made anything worse. It's not even that he says this after they apparently already made up. It's that he's blatantly stating she's insulting you behind your back in order to get them to stop fighting. Just, you see how nonsensical that is? My issue with that isn't even that it's not funny. It's that it's relying on something so ungodly stupid that it just feels desperate. And you know what? They were so proud of this joke that they use it multiple times.
Next time Lynn says she needs a windshield wiper when Lisa talks, or Lana says Lola snores like Pop Pop, I am staying out of it.
There, I told you I'd work that in with this video. But I mean, how forceful can you be? And the whole episode is trying to say that sometimes you just need to let people hash stuff out. And that's fine, I get that. But this is just so unclever, relies on so many forced jokes and out-of-character moments, and just waters everything down to where it loses all sense of humor and entertainment, that it's an episode I'm not surprised so many people have their own quarrels about. Now, just like Hey Arnold, I very easily could have made this a top 10 worst list. But I'm not going to because, again, just like Hey Arnold, not only do the top 5 worst episodes have way too much wrong with them as is, some of the other bad episodes kind of repeat the same problem, just in lesser degrees. So there's no point in doing a top 10 list when a few of the choices will just be discussing flaws I'll be talking about later anyway. And I will say this too, I only limit my honorable mentions to 3 spots, so there's a good chance you're not going to see an episode you hate in this video. So here are my honorable mentions. Fantastic Voyage. It's just a boring episode that relies on getting its humor from blowing up stereotypes about people who get new cars. And while I guess that could have been mildly humorous, it instead just gets too repetitive that you get bored very easily. The only thing that keeps you from staying bored is Lynn Sr.'s behavior, because that snaps you from being bored to being annoyed. But Even with that, I still say this episode is way too forgettable to be on the list. Making the case. Yeah, maybe avoid making episodes with "making the" in the title. It doesn't seem to be a recipe for success. This is another episode that relies on pretty specific humor, and eventually just turns into a tortured porn-esque episode. But even with all of that, I do still see some hints of effort in it, especially when cautioning why you need to be careful with what you put on the internet. So, because of that, I'll give it a break. Heavy Metal. Yeah, this is the Loud House's version of New Bully on the Block for me. I know it's a bad episode. I know it focuses on so many cheap stereotypical writing tactics. I know it makes the Loud sisters look so overly obnoxious and too much of a nuisance to Lincoln. I know the cliche of "if a girl picks on you, it's because she likes you" is so worn out at this point, and this episode does nothing to make it any less worn out. But I don't know, even with all of that, this episode still manages to keep me entertained. I think it's really an episode that's so bad, it's kinda good to me. Anyway, let's just move on to the worst episode on this list. And let's be honest, I think you all already know what it is.
Is why you are the worst sister ever!
No such luck. You know what the hardest thing about doing this is? It's having to talk about episodes everyone's addressed. I'm basically trying to get water from the Sahara Desert at this point. But I guess I'll tell those who haven't seen this episode what it's about. It's about Lincoln complaining about having zero time to himself because he always has to go to his sister's events. But after going to the first of Lynn's baseball games he's ever been to, Lynn chokes and blames Lincoln, saying her choke was because he's bad luck. And she starts warning the rest of the family to stay away from Lincoln. So Lincoln decides to use that to get out of going to all of his sister's events, so he can finally have some time to himself. But the family decides to keep him out of their lives altogether because of his bad luck. Once again, I get the comedy this episode is going for. I get it wants to poke fun at how crazy people's superstitions can get. But it's trying so hard to make comedy out of this focus in such cheap and poorly written ways. And on top of that, I think it might be going for a certain type of message that it botches in one of the worst ways I've ever seen. Which I'll get to at the end, but let's focus on why its comedy doesn't work first. It wants you to find humor in Lincoln suffering because he's trying to get out of giving his sister support. Now I'm assuming that's what they're going for, because that's not how it comes off. You can argue all you want that he went about getting his own alone time in the wrong way, but it feels more like an act of desperation on his part that you can't really find yourself faulting him on. Also, the excuses this family comes up with to shun him are so poor that it's almost like this episode was written by someone who's never seen this show before.
We're going to the beach tomorrow?
Ooh, gosh, sorry, son, not you. Someone could get attacked by a shark.
Or caught in a riptide.
Or stung by a jellyfish.
If that happens, I call peeing on the wound.
Come on, you guys, be reasonable.
You're bad luck, Lincoln. You can't come.
There's a fine line with how far you can push humor like this, and this episode is pushing it so far, it can't even see that line.
Yeah, the line is a dot to you.
I've said this so many times, if you can't get your humor across without completely rewriting or even flanderizing all your characters' personalities, then it's a sign you don't know how to do this type of humor. Bottom line, this whole episode is a Lincoln torture episode. There's little substance to it, it relies on the exact same joke all throughout the episode, its reasons for doing what it's doing to Lincoln are so poor, and a part of me wants to write this off as a bad comedic attempt like Curly's Girl. But I don't think it is a bad comedic attempt. I think this is an actual message about why you shouldn't lie to get your own alone time. Even though I really can't fault Lincoln for lying. It feels like Lincoln just wants a few days to do his own thing for once. The episode itself establishes on multiple occasions that all of Lincoln's time centers around his sisters, and he can't even so much as read a comic book because of it. That's sad! That makes you pity Lincoln! That doesn't make you enjoy all his comedic attempts at making him suffer for lying. This is the type of trope I can't stand episodes trying to use. The nothing is worse than a liar trope, because it opens the doors to horrible messages like this. Instead of coming off as a don't lie message, it comes off as a message saying that if you want your own alone time, you're automatically a dick. All your time should be spent on other people. Yet, if anyone actually followed that, they'd go certifiably insane. Everyone needs their own downtime. Everyone needs a point in which they can cool off. And that's all I'm seeing from Lincoln. And if he's an asshole for doing that, then this episode has me rooting for the asshole. And no, I don't think this episode is dangerous, and anyone who sees it is gonna feel like an asshole themselves for wanting their own alone time. I think they're gonna look at this episode trying to preach this, and get so fed up with it that they view it as one of the worst episodes they've ever seen. To me, that's what truly makes a bad episode. And yes, for the record, this is one of the worst episodes of any show I've ever seen. But you know what? That's still an accomplishment. Lucky you.
She's got you there, Loud!
Could you just please go back inside?
Anyway, that's another show I really enjoy, now having been ripped apart by me. But unlike Hey Arnold, it's a show that's found a nice amount of haters, and honestly, I'm not surprised. With what's been going on behind the scenes and having its own political agendas at times, not to mention the incestuous drawings on DeviantArt, I'm not surprised people find it overhyped and overrated. But it's something I still have a huge amount of admiration for. I honestly praised this show enough in my top 10 list on it, so I won't overdo it here. But I'll just sum it up by saying it's a show that I feel you should give a chance if you haven't seen it yet. And it's one I still consider one of the best shows airing at this moment. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next review.